So welcome to the afternoon session. We have got three distinguished speakers with us, Professor VijayRaghavan, followed by Dr. Ramadas, and then Dr. Lalitambika. And we're going to start with Dr. VijayRaghavan. I'm going to give an anecdotal introduction of him. When I was a young postdoc at Cambridge, my first few weeks, I was very full of myself that I have arrived at Cambridge. And my mentor reminded me, Sambuddha, only three letters matter in life, FRS. Okay. So, Professor VijayRaghavan is a fellow of the Royal Society, also fellow of the National Academy of Science in the US. And he has been our PSA during COVID. So I don't need to introduce him much. So without further ado, Professor VijayRaghavan, it's your floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Sambuddha. There are some very uncharitable expansions of certain acronyms. So we'll leave it at that. Yeah. So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I must say that I'm a bit out of place here for the following reason. And we discussed some of that in the previous session. And that is because of one's experience and interactions, you do get a sort of a broader and a higher level perspective. But it doesn't mean that you have a deep domain understanding which is absolutely needed to execute on many aspects of this perspective, and which each of you have in your domains. So a combination of both is needed. What I'll try to do today, which is a bit distinct from what I'd been tasked to do, I'd been tasked to talk about the Deep Ocean mission, but we have here Dr. Ramadas, who's the Director of the National Institute of Ocean Technology from the Ministry of Earth Sciences, who's one of the leaders of the mission, and he will do a more thorough and much more skin in the game talk about that. But what I will tell you about is what's happened over the last few years in India, which is the launching of or amplifying of previously launched many deep science missions, what are called big science missions. And these are in some ways relatively many of the scientific community are relatively unaware about it. People in each of the domains involved know about it, but people across domains don't know, and people in industry are not particularly aware. And this is an enormous opportunity for India to get into deep tech, not just in IT, but deep tech connecting IT with the physical, particularly with mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. So the cyber-physical IT connection through these missions will allow a growth of industry and academia, and there's a lot of resources available, of course, for projects. So that's the goal of my talk, to tell you about these big science missions and then a little bit about the Deep Ocean mission. Now, there are many new missions which have been launched. One is the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, the 30-meter telescope, and the LIGO, the first one, has got two sites in America, and the third one is coming up in Hingoli in Maharashtra, just been inaugurated. The 30-meter telescope comes up in Hawaii, and India is a partner. The square kilometer array comes up in South Africa and Australia, with India as a partner. The International Thermonuclear Energy Research, the ITER, is coming up in France for fusion energy. India has launched a cyber-physical mission, a supercomputer mission, and recently a quantum mission. And we're going to hear today about a deep ocean mission and other missions taking waste to wealth on scale, and a biodiversity mission and a human genome mission are in the works and not yet done, and hopefully they'll happen soon. As well, very soon, hopefully, a National Research Foundation, which will allow the amplification of these kinds of programs and many others into our broader university system. So let me run through each of these briefly to tell you what is the context in which we can see them as students, faculty in an institute like this, but also in other institutions, and what are the opportunities. Now, first of all, the Laser Interferometric Gravitational Wave Observatory began in the US as a project of Caltech and MIT to detect gravitational waves. This was suggested by Einstein in 1916, and these waves couldn't, technologically it was not feasible to look at this and to test whether they're there or not. And the first discovery was done, I think, in 2015, almost a century after Einstein's predictions. And we have now, that was rewarded by a Nobel Prize very soon after to Barry Barish and Kip Thorne, in 2017. Now, LIGO has, turned out to be an entirely new pair of eyes. Entirely new pair of eyes. What is this? Entirely new pair of eyes into the universe. And with India's LIGO coming up, there are enormous opportunities for Indian engineers and scientists. So it will be inaugurated in 2030. It will functional in 2030. It was just inaugurated now. And that means you're going to have a requirement for high quality engineers, people who understand vacuum, people who understand, optics, lasers on large scale. And there are two routes to this. One is to just do what has been done in the US, and the other is to develop and modify that and do it here. And the Department of Atomic Energy is doing an extraordinary job at its Rajaramana Center for Advanced Technology in Indore, and there are enormous opportunities for us in training undergraduates who go into graduate school now, and by 2030 they'll be in place to take on LIGO. So LIGO is, as with many other of these big missions, they are anchored globally. They're sort of global projects, which we have our anchor in India, and there are great opportunities for us in LIGO. And this one, as I said, will be ready in 2030, and there is a new, not really a planetarium, it's called Cosmos is the acronym for it, but there's a major new planetarium coming up in Mysore, which will be a training ground for undergraduates there will also be a planetarium there, but these undergraduates in engineering and in science will have opportunities, lab opportunities there, but they'll also have real-time access to telescopes, LIGO and other optical telescopes too, so that they can play around with astronomy and big data. So this is going to be a big impact. So from the perspective of global science, it will advance India's ability and all our other telescopes to detect astrophysical and cosmological phenomena. So LIGO, for example, might detect something and it will allow our terrestrial telescopes here to point to that direction and look at new astronomical and cosmological phenomena. So it's absolutely terrific. Another project which was approved much earlier is the 30-meter telescope. It's an optical telescope, and India is a major participant. It's coming up in Hawaii, and this will enable observations from ultraviolet to mid-infrared with up to 80 times the sensitivity of current telescopes. This went through a huge range of problems to have it in Mauna Kea in Hawaii, where there are also already lots of telescopes there, but the local tribal population objected to what they argued was violation of their sacred sites. That argument has been settled. 30-meter telescope construction should start soon, and we'll have that ready again in a few years' time. And again, India's contribution is about 10% of this, substantially in kind, and we have impressively the mirroring being done here by a company managed by Ayuka in Pune, but the company is a small Pondicherry company doing really top-class, world-class images over here, world-class development of mirrors over here. So this is an example of Indian industry being involved in somewhat of a modest scale. The square kilometer array is a major radio telescope. Govind Swarup started a big science project here many years ago, which was first the Ooty radio telescope, which was big for its time, then the giant meter wave radio telescope near Pune, and then he proposed the idea, along with others, for this kind of a square kilometer array, looking at a range of wavelengths in the radio spectrum, both a mid-range in South Africa and a low range in Australia, and these hundreds, actually in Australia will be thousands of little telescopes, will look at the radio spectrum and it'll be a great boost for radio astronomy. And India is also a major contributor in developing the science and the technology, and again, a lot of our contribution will be in kind. So this is the top is the giant meter wave radio telescope in Narayangau in Pune, and then you have the square kilometer array mid in South Africa and the low in Australia. Now, the ITER project, which is the promise of fusion energy, started about 35 years ago with 35 countries, and someone higher up in the government called it ITER money eater. Its deadlines have never been met. The amount of money going in it has just kept increasing. Its management was not sufficiently good. That changed dramatically about 5 years earlier, and that and the development of other kinds of fusion, independent fusion technologies, makes fusion energy more promising. But the question is whether this will deliver on a practical scale or not is not clear, but at least in terms of a prototype, it might happen over the next 25 years, addressing some key energy problems 25 years after that. So these are very long-term investments, and India is also a partner over there. Very recently, literally about a month or so ago, the quantum mission was launched by the government, and this is based on principles of quantum mechanics, which of course, as you all know, were developed in the early 20th century. And basically the idea is at two levels: one, looking at experimentally to develop quantum computers using multiple kinds of approaches and technologies, but also to look at quantum computing and quantum security and post-quantum security and so on and so forth. This will have a huge distributed approach and will benefit many institutions working on these areas, as well as specifically a couple trying to develop computers, such as those in Raman Institute, IISc, and the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. So these are the kinds of big ocean projects, and my concern with each of them is that while there's enormous value in the success of their launch, for them to go forward, bottom up, there is not sufficient involvement and integrated collaboration happening. It's everyone for each of these missions expects the government to somehow be the herder of cats, bring everyone together for every aspect of the mission and get that done. That, if at all it happens, it will happen in a manner which is not most effective for a mission. These missions are not missions like that of ISRO or the Department of Atomic Energy, which are much more directed and much more focused. And therefore you could have one relatively isolated institution driving the whole thing and developing those technologies. Those ages are gone. Today, this is an age of collaboration between industry and academia in a distributed manner, and these missions all have that flexibility. So unless bottom up, we grasp the opportunities and proactively go to the ministries dealing with the missions and involve ourselves, you are not going to have these missions successful. Now, these kinds of successes are likely to happen in a deep ocean mission because it's much more structured for collaboration. And Dr. Ramdas is here. But this was a mission which took a long time coming, and this mission looks analogous to the space mission to look at the deep ocean in multiple ways. And this is steered by the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and the Ministry of Earth Sciences has several autonomous institutions. But the idea is that every institution in the country should have researchers, departments, teaching, working on the deep ocean, whether they are along the coastline or not. Remember, this is a deep ocean mission and not a coastline mission. It's not a coastal marine mission. It's about looking at the deep ocean, looking at deep ocean oceanography, which includes geology, geochemistry, biology, climate, and the whole works. So this mission has got 6 themes, and those themes are deep sea technologies for developing deep sea mining, crewed submersibles. The idea is to develop over the course of the mission a crewed submersible which can take a human about 6 kilometers below the surface. That's a formidable task to even do it for a kilometer or so. I mean, you can take humans down, but bringing them up is a big challenge, alive. So that is a big technological challenge. Underwater robotics is a major area of interest. Communication is a big challenge in the deep ocean. So combining, getting in new technologies for communication is very important. Ocean climate advisory services are going to be critical, analyzing data from, the entire Indo-Pacific, for example, and from India, from the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal, the African coast, all of that is going to be important. But the mission will not restrict itself to seas which are close to us. There will be also components which address ocean challenges and in other oceans. There's nothing to stop that from happening as long as one gets resources and people and collaborations in place. And areas such as the Arctic and Antarctic will also be looked at by this mission. So the technological innovations for exploration and conservation of deep sea biodiversity is another theme. Then there's exploration of minerals from hydrothermal vents. There are international treaties which allot to different countries specific sites for exploration, and India has a specific location. Those will be explored a little more deeply now. And looking at getting geothermal ocean energy as well as desalination on scale will be another project. And of course, finally, which is what I'll talk about a little more, will be an advanced marine station for ocean biology. Now, this advanced marine station for ocean biology is something which will be a location where there will be a top quality lab where marine biology can be done, where there'll be yearly, all around the year, meetings and workshops and training for people all over the country, getting the best scientists from all over the world. But the laboratory work will be distributed for the deep ocean mission to laboratories all over the country. Our marine laboratories, there are several of them, high quality. The Ministry of Earth Sciences has many laboratories, and laboratories all over the country. You can be in Rajasthan and still do deep ocean science. You can handle big data, samples can be taken. So this will be the hub for major research in the deep ocean. Basically, the idea of this is to use harbors from which boats go out from other locations, larger ships go elsewhere, we can collaborate and hire ships and do biology of various kinds. Many of you may be familiar with the Tara expedition of the European Molecular Biology Organization that sampled and sequenced seawater, as it were, from the root of the ship. There's a new version going on now, Tara 2, which is taking in-depth samples, and there's interesting technologies going. So those are the kinds of projects or new ones across various ocean depths and scales which will take place. So this will create a bedrock of capacity and enterprise in ocean biology and engineering. And this will be one of India's most ambitious and prolific missions in setting up this marine stations. I'm quoting from the document which was there. So this I've already said. Now there'll be a major number of educational programs for this vertical, and there are, I think, several hundred junior research fellowships, postdoctoral fellowships, and PhD scholarships available for this. These will be pegged so that they're attractive. So projects to scientists all over the country where they can have these JRFs and PhD students and postdocs working will be available. And there will be capacity building and joint courses with international partners as needed. I told you about the meetings and workshops. There'll be a master's program in ocean biology and marine engineering, interdisciplinary programs of the kind we talked about, and strong PhD programs. There will be specific mission. It's not going to be an open-ended area that you do whatever comes to your mind. There's room for that. But it will also take on specific quests in specific regions, specific kinds of exploration, specific ranges of scale in biology, and therefore looking at it from those perspectives. And analyzing the data, aggregating it, and using it for sustainable economic growth and linking it to there's a major blue economy mission which is going on that needs to get this inputs from here so that there's sustainable development happening. It will be the node to coordinate ambitious programs of ocean biology across the country, and it will create a world-class human resource needed for ramping this mission. I don't think there's anything new I want to say here. There is a memorandum of understanding which was signed with Sorbonne in Paris and the French Ocean Laboratories so that there will be a joint master's program. That needs to be reactivated, but that's likely to happen. And this I've already, there will also be deep sea networks. Yes, this is important for data acquisition, electro-optical cables, optical fiber. So there's every kind of engineer and scientist has a role to play in this. So, so these kinds of technologies will be very important. And the goal is to get trained and capable scientists to make and use detection units connected to junction boxes of the seabed. Communication is a major challenge, and data sample collection, data sample integrity, bringing them back, analyzing it. So there are big opportunities for both labs in-house as well as by the coast or on the sea. So these are master's programs which will look at diversity at different levels, next generation sequencing in large scale of biological samples, marine biodiversity inventories, marine species barcoding, but importantly, again for people outside biology, climate change and ecosystem functioning, where many life sciences aspects are linked with function. So I will stop here to say that, you know, this is a mission which I think is about 4,000 crores, Ramdas, the entire mission? 4,800 crores, just been started. And there are 6 verticals, as I said, those spending has already started. So there's a big opportunity for this. And really our challenge is that for these kinds of missions, if there are 2 routes open, one is the Ministry of Earth Sciences does it all by themselves in their labs, in a model which has classically been followed by ISRO and DAE. They hire people, train them, and carry on with this. That age is gone. Today we need a much more diverse and integrated way with our broader ecosystem, which brings in people looking at computer science, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, physics, chemistry, mathematics. And the intention of the Ministry of Earth Sciences is to involve everyone and also build capacity in marine sciences, and also through that make big data as exciting as it is today in astronomy. So people are the key to success. That path is available and it's for us to grasp. So I'll stop here.
We have plenty of time for questions.
Long silence, good. Yeah.
So, if I'm talking about space exploration mission and deep sea mission, is there any technology which we can develop which can be used in both the cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point. And I mean, there are some challenges unique to deep sea exploration. The obvious ones in dealing with high pressure and water and so on and so forth. But there's also another big challenge, which is not there in space, where communication is relatively easy in space. Communication is extraordinarily difficult, but other than in the deep ocean. So other than that, you know, sensors, feedback, sample collection, integrity, robotics, operations, data collection, data analysis, they cut across not just space, but all these other missions.
Okay, sir, so like in space, we usually harness energy from solar energy, but in deep sea, we don't have any source. So, is there any way to harness energy when we are doing exploration in the deep sea?
I mean, theoretically, I think there are ways of doing it, but to connect that with a specific remote operation vehicle is not yet feasible. There are, however, that is not currently the limitation in remote operating vehicles. You can get them, you know, batteries which last a significantly long time for their operation. Submarines have solved that problem by having nuclear submarines, but that's different. They can go on and on and on, but there are people there, so they have to come up. They can't just stay on there. but that's a different kind of mechanism. There are also diesel-operated submarines which are very polluting and noisy. But, so energy is a challenge, but it's been addressed in multiple other ways, different from space.
One question there. Try your luck. Stand up and shout it out.
So the deep sea exploration you referred, it is directed more towards deep sea mining or also exploring the biological aspect?
So I've spoken substantially only about one vertical, which is about the biological exploration. But as I said at the beginning, there are several other aspects to the mission, and they look at Yeah, these are the 6 themes. So, deep sea mining, crude submersible, climate advisories, deep sea biodiversity, minerals, energy and fresh water, and the last is what I spoke about, which is biology. So, there are many other aspects.
Okay. So my another question is regarding the robotics you mentioned for the deep sea exploration. Can you tell a little something more about that? What are the challenges regarding robotics for deep sea exploration?
Well, the problem, so about 3 or 4 countries have developed really good remote operated vehicles. And typically the earliest ones, and including some of the current ones, go down and have got good cameras. They also now have ways by which samples can be collected at different depths. The principal problem with biological samples is that there are basically, you can put them into 2 categories. Those which survive in high pressure and under those conditions where you collected those samples, and those which can survive in the laboratory under laboratory conditions. The former category is very difficult to bring up alive and sustain in the laboratory. And there are technologies now which collect the samples, keep them at the pressure at which they were collected, and then change the composition in the laboratory of the water to make it identical to what that water was, keeping the pressure intact. These are huge challenges to do that at any scale. To do it on a large scale is, people try to do that. To do it on a small scale is very different. To do it for multiple samples poses a huge amount of challenge. So there are enormous challenges there. But there are other routes where you can just collect these samples, and it doesn't matter if they live or die. You can analyze their morphology, their genome sequences, and sometimes there are those which are agnostic to pressure and they will survive in the laboratory, and the Ministry of Earth Sciences labs have such samples collected.
Thank you.
You mean so, I mean, a very large part of the deep ocean is unexplored, and even those which have been explored very peripherally, because unlike, satellite mapping of the surface, more detailed mapping of samples below the surface is a big challenge. So we know a lot about the geology of deep oceans for a variety of, over 100 years of exploration. But we know very little about the nature of the samples, the chemistry of different layers, and what's happening. So there's no particular region, it's just all there. We've, of course, messed up a very large part of the regions, near coasts in particular, but also in the deep ocean. The waters are very polluted. Climate change and loss of biodiversity has changed ocean currents dramatically. So there's a lot of interesting things to be done, but lots of changes which have taken place.
Is there a way by which common public can look into the data that is acquired from these centers, so that a fresh perspective or a new kind of things can be taken out of that data?
So the data collection needs to start, and that needs to happen. I think a good model is what is already in place in astronomy. So telescopes collect data. They have those who collecting it have first dibs at an analysis, and then the data is available to researchers for use. So that's one model. The other model is that, again, a telescope model is that researchers put in proposals for use and collection of data, And the Ministry of Earth Sciences also has called for proposals in addition to top-down projects of various kinds. They have called for proposals which others are looking at.
But that will be a very so as there was a news a few months ago that one of a software engineer found out some pattern of in the NASA's some data that he got which was public. So that way a normal person can also
Absolutely. So there will be a lot of publicly available data, just as there is for astronomy.
Okay.
But to have the tools to examine that data and analyze it is a big challenge.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
A round of applause for Vijay.
Thank you.